The Great Hall of Harmony 7 Station was filled with the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Ambassadors from 12 species sat around the curved table, their translators humming softly as they spoke. But all eyes were now fixed on the Volanthi High Ambassador and the human delegation. Daniel Cole stood at the back of the human group. He was not the lead diplomat. He was just an assistant, a man who had volunteered for deep space work 3 years ago after losing his wife to illness. He had nothing left on Earth that called him home, so he went to the stars instead. The treaty negotiations had gone well for 6 months. The Volanthi Empire wanted peace with humanity, and humanity wanted access to Volanthi star charts. Everything was almost complete. But the Volanthi had one final tradition that could not be ignored. As is our custom, the High Ambassador announced, his golden scales shimmering under the lights. We offer a marriage bond to seal this treaty, a joining of blood between our peoples. The human delegation exchanged glances. They had prepared for this. Political marriages were common among the Volanthi. It was considered a great honor. The High Ambassador smiled, but there was something cruel in his expression. We have selected a female of noble blood for this purpose. Bring her forward. The doors at the far end of the hall opened. 2 Volanthi guards walked in, and between them was a female. Daniel heard the gasps from the other alien delegations. He heard the soft laughter from the Volanthi side of the room. He did not understand at first. To him, she looked like any other Volanthi, humanoid in shape, covered in small scales, with large dark eyes and a slender frame. But then he noticed the reactions. The other Volanthi would not look at her. Some turned their faces away in disgust. The female herself walked with her head down, her shoulders bent, as if she was trying to make herself smaller. Her scales were different colors. Where most Volanthi had uniform golden or silver scales, hers were patches of green, blue, and gray mixed together without pattern. Her frame was smaller than average, and there was something in her eyes, a watchful, guarded look that spoke of years of pain. "This is Ziveth," the High Ambassador said. Her name dripped from his mouth like poison. She is of noble blood, as required by tradition. She will serve as the bride. The human lead ambassador, a woman named Patricia Vance, stood frozen. Her face was red with anger. Everyone in the room understood what was happening. The Volanthi were offering their worst, their most unwanted, as an insult. They expected humanity to refuse, to break the negotiations, to prove that humans were just as shallow as every other species. "This is unacceptable," Ambassador Vance began. "You insult us with this, I accept." The voice came from the back of the human delegation. Everyone turned. Daniel Cole stepped forward, his expression calm and steady. The High Ambassador's smile faltered. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "I said I accept," Daniel repeated. He walked toward the center of the room, toward where Ziveth stood between her guards. "I will marry her." Silence fell over the great hall. The High Ambassador stared at him as if he had grown a second head. "You cannot be serious," the Volanthi said. "Do you not see what she is? She is defective. Her scales are wrong. Her mind is touched by the jealous sickness. She is the lowest of our kind. We give her to you as a lesson in humility." Daniel looked at Ziveth. She had raised her head slightly, and her dark eyes met his. In them, he saw confusion, fear, and underneath all of that, a tiny spark of desperate hope that she was trying hard to crush. "She's a person," Daniel said simply. "Not an insult. And I would be honored to marry her." The High Ambassador's face twisted with rage. This was not how it was supposed to go. The humans were supposed to reject her, to prove they were as vain as the Volanthi believed. Instead, this ordinary human man was treating their garbage like treasure. "You are a fool," the High Ambassador spat. "Maybe," Daniel said. But that's my choice to make, not yours. Ambassador Vance stepped forward, her diplomatic instincts kicking back in. The human delegation accepts the marriage bond. The treaty will be signed. The other alien delegations began to murmur among themselves. The Cruthini ambassador, a being made of living crystal, nodded with what might have been approval. The moth-like Sealan representative made a soft sound of respect. The Volanthi had no choice. They had offered the marriage according to their own tradition. They could not refuse without losing face. The High Ambassador waved his hand angrily. Then take her. She is yours now. Do not come crying to us when you realize what you have accepted. The guards stepped away from Ziveth. She stood alone in the center of the room, looking lost. Daniel walked to her side. "Hello," he said gently. "My name is Daniel. I know this isn't how either of us expected today to go. But I promise you, I will treat you with respect. You have nothing to fear from me." Ziveth stared at him. Her mouth opened, then closed. She did not know what to say. In her entire life, no one had ever spoken to her with such simple kindness. Why? She finally managed to whisper, "Why would you accept me?" You heard what he said. "I am defective, worthless. The jealous sickness runs in my blood. I am everything your people should hate." Daniel smiled, and there was sadness in it, but also warmth. "Where I come from, we don't throw people away because they're different. And honestly, anyone who would call you worthless isn't someone whose opinion matters to me." He offered her his hand. It was such a simple gesture. Among the Volanthi, physical touch was reserved only for those considered equals. No one had ever offered their hand to Ziveth. She stared at his outstretched palm for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. Her scales were cool against his skin. Her hand trembled slightly in his grip. But she held on. The treaty was signed that day. The Volanthi left Harmony 7 Station, believing they had won some kind of twisted joke. They laughed about the foolish human who had accepted their trash dot. But as Daniel, LEG's toward the human section of the station, she kept glancing at him. She was waiting for the mask to fall. She was waiting for the cruelty to begin. She had learned long ago that kindness was always temporary, always a trick. Daniel noticed her watching him. He did not comment on it. He simply showed her to her quarters, a small but comfortable room with a window looking out at the stars. "Get some rest," he said. "We have a long journey to Earth, and when you're ready, we can talk about what kind of life you want to build. No pressure, no expectations, just possibilities." He left her alone then. Ziveth stood in the middle of her room, surrounded by human things she did not understand, staring at the door he had closed behind him. She did not sleep that night. She sat by the window, watching the stars, and waited for the trap to close around her. But the trap never came. 3 weeks into the journey to Earth, Ziveth broke the 4th item in Daniel's quarters. This time, it was a small wooden frame that held a photograph. She swept it off the shelf with her arm and watched it shatter on the floor. Daniel walked in moments later. He looked at the broken glass, then at her. She stood in the corner, her scales shifting colors slightly, a sign of strong emotion among her kind. "That belonged to someone you loved," she said. It was not a question. She had seen him look at the photograph before. A human woman with kind eyes and dark hair. Now it is broken. "Are you not angry?" Daniel knelt down and carefully picked up the pieces of glass. "This was my wife, Katie," he said quietly. "She passed away 3 years ago." Ziveth felt something twist in her chest. She had expected him to yell, to strike her, to finally show the cruelty she knew all beings carried inside them. Instead, he was simply gathering broken glass with steady hands. "I broke it on purpose," she said, her voice harder now. "I wanted to hurt you. I know. Daniel placed the glass in a small container and picked up the photograph. It was undamaged. He looked at it for a moment, then set it gently on another shelf. You've been testing me since we left the station. The broken cup, the torn clothes, the food you threw away. You're waiting for me to hurt you back. Zyvath's hands curled into fists. And you will. Eventually. Everyone does. Daniel stood and faced her. There was no anger in his expression, only a deep, tired understanding that made her want to run from the room. I'm not going to hurt you, Zyvath. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever. He sat down on the small couch and gestured for her to sit as well. She remained standing. I know you don't believe me. That's okay. You've had a lifetime of people proving that trust is dangerous. I can't undo that with words. I can only show you day after day that I'm different. Why? The question burst from her like a wound opening. Why do you care? I am nothing. My own people threw me away. I am ugly. I am broken. The jealous sickness makes me feel everything too strongly. I cannot control my emotions. I am a burden to anyone foolish enough to keep me. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was soft. When Katie got sick, the doctors told us there was no cure. We had 2 years together before she died. In those 2 years, I learned something important. He looked at Zyvath with eyes that had seen grief and come out the other side. I learned that love isn't about perfection. It's not about finding someone without flaws. It's about choosing to stay, even when things are hard. Especially when things are hard. Zyvath did not understand. Among the Volanthi, weakness was hidden. Imperfection was shameful. The idea that someone would choose to stay with a broken person made no sense to her. You are strange, she said finally. Daniel laughed. It was a warm sound, without mockery. Yeah, humans are pretty strange. You'll get used to it. The days continued to pass. Zyvath stopped breaking things, though she was not sure why. She still refused to eat with Daniel, taking her meals alone in her room. She still watched him with suspicious eyes, waiting for the mask to fall. But the mask never fell. Daniel learned to cook Volanthi food. It took him many failed attempts. The first time, he burned the grain so badly that the ship's smoke detectors went off. But he kept trying. He researched Volanthi customs and recipes. He asked her questions about what she liked to eat, even when she refused to answer. One evening, she found a plate of food outside her door. It was not perfect. The spices were slightly wrong, and the texture was off. But it was recognizably a dish from her home world, a simple comfort food that servants ate. Not nobles dot. She stared at it for a long time. Then she ate it. Every bite. The next morning, she sat at the table with Daniel for the first time. She did not speak. Neither did he. But it was a start. A week later, everything changed. There was an accident in the engine room. A small explosion caused by a faulty power coupling. Zyvath was passing through the corridor when it happened. The force threw her against the wall. She felt her ribs crack. She felt her scales tear. When she opened her eyes, Daniel was there. His face was pale with fear. He was shouting for medical help, his hands pressing against her wounds to slow the bleeding. Stay with me, he said. Zyvath, stay with me. You're going to be okay. She wanted to laugh. Why would he care if she died? She was worthless. Her own people had said so. But the look in his eyes, the raw terror of losing her, made the laughter die in her throat. She woke up in the medical bay 2 days later. Daniel was asleep in a chair beside her bed. His clothes were wrinkled. His face was unshaven. There were dark circles under his eyes. He hasn't left, the ship's doctor told her quietly. Not once. We had to bring him food here because he refused to leave your side. Zyvath looked at Daniel's sleeping face. He looked exhausted. He looked like a man who had been fighting a battle she could not see. "Why?" she whispered. The doctor smiled gently. "You'll have to ask him that yourself." When Daniel woke, Ziveth was watching him. Her dark eyes were filled with something she could not name. "You stayed," she said. "Of course I stayed." "I do not understand you." Her voice cracked. "I have been cruel to you. I have broken your things. I have pushed you away at every moment. Why do you keep trying? Why do you care about someone like me?" Daniel reached out and gently took her hand. Her scales were warm now, heated by the medical equipment and her own confusion. "Because you matter," he said simply. "That's enough. That's always enough." Ziveth felt something break inside her. Not like glass, not like bones. Something softer. Something she had built long ago to protect herself from a universe that had never shown her kindness. A tear rolled down her face. It was the first time she had cried in decades. "I do not know how to be loved," she admitted. "I do not know how to accept kindness without waiting for the pain that follows." Daniel squeezed her hand. "Then we'll figure it out together. There's no rush. There's no test you have to pass. Just take it one day at a time." Ziveth closed her eyes. The fear was still there. The suspicion was still there. But underneath it, something new was growing. Something fragile and strange and terrifying. Hope. She held on to Daniel's hand and let herself rest. For the first time in her life, she did not feel completely alone. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong about everything. Earth was overwhelming. Zeva stood at the window of the transport ship as it descended through the clouds. Below her, a world of blue oceans and green forests stretched out in every direction. It was so different from the cold metal stations and pale desert worlds she had known. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Daniel stood beside her, watching her face instead of the view. "Wait until you see the mountains." They landed in a region Daniel called the Pacific Northwest. The air was cool and smelled of pine trees and rain. Ziveth stepped off the transport and felt grass beneath her feet for the first time. She knelt down and touched it with her fingers, amazed by how soft it was. A human woman was waiting for them. She was older, with gray hair and warm eyes that looked exactly like Daniel's. When she saw her son, she ran forward and wrapped her arms around him. "Danny," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's so good to have you home." "Hi, Mom." Daniel hugged her back tightly. "I missed you too." Then the woman turned to Ziveth. There was no disgust in her face. No fear. Oh, fear. Only curiosity and warmth. "And you must be Ziveth," she said. "I'm Linda. Welcome to Earth, dear." Ziveth did not know what to do. Among the Volanthi, elders rarely acknowledged her. When they did, it was with contempt. But this human woman was smiling at her as if she was actually happy to meet her. "Thank you," Ziveth managed to say. Linda reached out and gently took her hands. Her skin was soft and warm. "You're shaking, sweetheart. Are you cold? Let's get you inside. I made soup." The house was small but filled with light. Windows looked out onto forests and distant mountains. Photographs covered the walls, images of Daniel at different ages, of Linda and a man who must have been Daniel's father, of the woman called Katie. Ziveth stopped in front of Katie's picture. The woman was laughing in the image, her dark hair blown by wind. "She was lovely," Ziveth said quietly. Linda came to stand beside her. "She was. And she would have liked you, I think." Katie always had a soft spot for people who had been through hard times. The days that followed were strange and wonderful. Linda treated Ziveth like a daughter, teaching her to cook human food and showing her how to tend the small garden behind the house. Neighbors came to visit. They stared at Zivith with curiosity, but not with disgust. Some even complimented her. "Your scales are amazing," said a young human girl who lived nearby. "They look like stained glass in a church window." Zivith did not know what stained glass was, but Daniel showed her pictures. Beautiful windows made of colored glass, arranged in patterns to catch the light. She looked at her own mismatched scales, and for the first time, did not see ugliness. Daniel took her hiking in the mountains. They walked for hours through forests filled with sounds she had never heard. Birds singing, wind moving through leaves, water rushing over rocks. At the top of a ridge, they stopped to rest. Below them, the sun was setting over the ocean. The sky turned colors Zivith had never imagined, orange and pink and gold, reflected on the water like liquid fire. She stood in silence, unable to speak. Tears ran down her face, though she was not sad. "What is this feeling?" she asked. Daniel smiled. "I think that's peace." Zivith had never known peace before. She had known fear, shame, anger, and loneliness. But not this. Not this quiet stillness that filled her chest like warm light. "I like it," she whispered. The peace did not last. 3 weeks after their arrival, a Volanthi delegation came to Earth. They came for diplomatic reasons, they said, to strengthen ties between their peoples. But Zivith knew the truth the moment she saw who led them. Lord Calith had been her master for 10 years. He had bought her from her family when she was young, keeping her as a servant in his household. He had never touched her. She was too ugly for that, but he had made her life a constant misery. Every day, he found new ways to remind her of her. WORTHLESSNESS. The diplomatic reception was held in a grand building in a city called Seattle. Zivith stood beside Daniel, wearing a simple human dress that Linda had helped her choose. She tried to make herself small, to disappear, but Lord Calith found her anyway. "Ah, the defective one," he said loudly, his golden scales gleaming under the lights. His voice carried across the room. "I wondered what had become of you. Tell me, human, how do you tolerate such ugliness in your bed?" The room went quiet. Humans and Volanthi alike turned to watch. Zivith felt her scales flush with shame. She wanted to run. She wanted to hide. She wanted to disappear. But Daniel stepped forward, placing himself between her and Lord Calith. "I'd appreciate it if you didn't speak about my wife that way," Daniel said. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Lord Calith laughed. "Your wife? You actually married the creature? I knew humans were primitive, but this is remarkable. Do you not see those scales? That twisted form? She is the lowest of our kind. A joke. She is the most beautiful person I have ever met." Daniel's voice cut through the laughter. The room went completely silent. "I don't know what your species considers beautiful," Daniel continued, his eyes never leaving Lord Calith's face. "But where I come from, beauty isn't just about scales or skin or shape. It's about courage, kindness, the strength to survive when everyone around you has tried to break you. By that measure, Zivith is more beautiful than anyone in this room." Lord Calith's face twisted with rage. "You dare. I'm not finished." Daniel's voice was quiet but hard as stone. "Any civilization that throws away its own people based on appearance has no right to call itself advanced. Any species that treats its children like garbage because they look different should be ashamed. You gave Zivith to us as an insult, but the only insult I see is you." Lord Calith sputtered, unable to find words. The other Volanthi in the room looked uncomfortable. The human diplomats were trying to hide their smiles. Daniel turned his back on the Volanthi lord and walked back to Zivith. He took her hand gently. "Let's go home," he said. They left the reception together. Behind them, Lord Keleth shouted something about disrespect and consequences, but no one was listening to him anymore. That night, Ziveth sat on the porch of Linda's house, looking at the stars. Daniel sat beside her. "Did you mean it?" she asked. "What you said about me being beautiful?" "Every word." Ziveth turned to face him. Her eyes were wet with tears she could not hold back. "No one has ever defended me before," she said. "No one has ever stood up for me. My whole life, I have been told I am worthless. And I believed it. I believed it because everyone I knew agreed. But you," she struggled to find words, "you see something in me that I cannot see in myself." Daniel reached down and gently touched her face. "Then I'll keep telling you until you believe it too." Ziveth wept that night, really wept, for the first time since she was a child. She cried for the years of pain, for the cruelty she had endured, for the person she might have become if anyone had shown her kindness. And Daniel held her through all of it, saying nothing, simply being there. When dawn came, something had changed. The walls around her heart had not disappeared, but they had cracked. And through those cracks, light was beginning to enter. 6 months had passed since that night on the porch. Ziveth had changed in ways she could not have imagined. She smiled now, real smiles that reached her eyes. She laughed at Daniel's jokes, even the bad ones. She had learned to cook human food, and Linda said her pasta was better than anything in the local restaurants. But some things were harder to change. Ziveth sat at the kitchen table, watching through the window as Daniel talked to a woman in the garden. She was a colleague from the diplomatic office, a human female with bright red hair and an easy laugh. They were discussing work, nothing more. But Ziveth felt her scales darken with emotion. Her chest felt tight. Her hands trembled. The jealous sickness dot among the Volanti. Certain individuals were born with heightened emotional sensitivity. They felt everything more strongly than others. Love, fear, anger, and yes, jealousy. It was considered a shameful condition, a defect of the mind. Those who had it were taught to hide it, to suppress their feelings, to pretend they were normal. Ziveth had never been able to hide it. Her emotions burned too hot, showed too clearly in her changing scales. It was one of the many reasons her people had rejected her. Now, watching Daniel laugh with another woman, she felt that familiar fire rising in her chest. She knew it was foolish. She knew Daniel loved her. He had proven it 1,000 times in 1,000 ways. But the jealous sickness did not care about logic. It only cared about the fear of losing what she had finally found. The red-haired woman left. Daniel came back inside, still smiling. "That was Melissa from the trade office," he said. "She wanted to discuss the new shipping routes." "Pretty boring stuff, honestly." Ziveth said nothing. She kept her face turned away, trying to hide the dark color of her scales. Daniel noticed immediately. He always noticed. "Hey." He knelt beside her chair and gently took her hands. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." The lie tasted bitter in her mouth. Ziveth. She closed her eyes. "The jealous sickness. I cannot control it. When I see you with others, especially human females, I feel like I am burning from the inside. I know it is foolish. I know you would never betray me. But the feeling comes anyway, and I cannot stop it." She expected him to be angry. She expected him to tell her that she was being ridiculous, that her emotions were too much, that she needed to control herself. Instead, Daniel smiled. "Can I tell you something about humans?" he said. Ziveth opened her eyes. "What?" "We don't call it the jealous sickness. We call it passion." He squeezed her hands gently. "When someone feels things deeply, love, loyalty, protectiveness, we don't see it as a defect. We see it as a gift. The most devoted lovers, the fiercest friends, the most loyal partners, they all feel things more strongly than others. That's not weakness. That's strength. Ziveth stared at him. My people told me I was broken because I felt too much. Your people were wrong. They said no one would ever want me because I was too possessive. Too intense, too difficult. Daniel leaned forward and pressed his forehead gently against hers. Then they were fools. I would rather have someone who loves fiercely than someone who loves carefully. I would rather have a partner who burns with passion than one who is merely warm. Tears spilled down Ziveth's face. You truly do not mind? Even when I become jealous over nothing? We'll work through it together, Daniel said. When you feel that fire rising, tell me. Don't hide it. Don't be ashamed of it. Let me help you remember that you are loved, that you are safe, that no one is going to take me away from you. Ziveth threw her arms around him and held him tightly. Her scales shifted through a rainbow of colors, the sign of overwhelming emotion. I do not deserve you, she whispered. That's where you're wrong, Daniel replied. We deserve each other. For a while life was good. Better than good. Ziveth learned to talk about her feelings instead of hiding them. When the jealous sickness flared, she went to Daniel, and he held her until the fire passed. She was not cured. The sensitivity was part of her nature and always would be, but she learned to live with it. Then the message came. Daniel received it late one night. His face went pale as he read the words on the screen. Ziveth knew immediately that something was very wrong. What is it? She asked. The Volanthi Empire. Daniel's voice was tight. They're on the verge of war with the Dreth Collective. Apparently, there have been border conflicts for months. The situation is deteriorating fast. Ziveth felt a chill run through her scales. And what does that have to do with us? Daniel hesitated. That hesitation told her everything. The Volanthi High Council has sent a demand to Earth's government, he said finally. They want you back. The world seemed to stop. What? They claim our marriage was never legitimate. They say you are still property of the Empire, and they want you returned immediately. If we refuse. Daniel swallowed hard. They're threatening to withdraw from all treaties with humanity. They might even join forces with the Dreth against us. Ziveth felt cold. The old fear came rushing back, the terror of being dragged back to that life of shame and servitude. They cannot do this, she said, her voice shaking. They gave me away. They threw me away like garbage. I know. Daniel's face was hard with anger. I'm not going to let them take you back. Not now. Not ever. Daniel, you cannot fight the entire Volanthi Empire for me. I am not worth. Don't. His voice was sharp. Don't you dare say you're not worth it. You are worth everything. You are worth more than treaties, more than politics, more than peace with a civilization that treats its own people like property. Ziveth looked at him. His eyes were blazing with determination. She had never seen him so fierce. They will destroy you, she whispered. They have a fleet of warships. Humanity cannot stand against them alone. Then we'll find allies. We'll find another way. Daniel took her face in his hands. I made you a promise when I accepted that marriage bond. I said I would treat you with respect. I said you had nothing to fear from me. But I should have said more. I should have said that I would never let anyone hurt you again. That I would stand between you and the entire galaxy if I had to. Tears streamed down Ziveth's face. Why? Why do you fight so hard for me? Because I love you. It was the first time he had said those words. Because you are my wife, my partner, my home. Because when the Volanthi gave you to me as an insult, they gave me the greatest gift of my life. Ziveth could not speak. She could only cling to him as the world shifted around them. That night, they watched the stars from the porch one last time. Somewhere out there, a fleet was preparing to come for her. Somewhere out there, her people were demanding her return. But Ziveth was not afraid. For the first time in her life, She had something worth fighting for. And so did Daniel. The next morning, news arrived that Volanthi warships had entered human space. The battle for Ziveth had begun. The Volanthi fleet hung in orbit around Earth like a ring of silver knives. 40 warships, each one armed with weapons that could turn cities to glass. The message they sent was simple: return Ziveth or face destruction. Earth's defense forces scrambled to respond. Ships launched from stations across the solar system, forming a defensive line between the Volanthi and the planet. But everyone knew the truth. In a straight fight, the Volanthi would win. Humanity did not have enough ships, enough weapons, enough time. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from every major species gathered virtually, their holographic images filling a great hall in New York City. The Volanthi High Admiral appeared on screen, his golden scales bright with triumph. The creature called Ziveth is property of the Volanthi Empire, he declared. She was given in marriage without proper authority. The contract is void. We demand her immediate return. Earth's president, a woman named Carol Bennett, stood firm. Ziveth is a citizen of Earth now. She has rights here. We do not recognize her as property. Then you will burn. The High Admiral's voice dripped with contempt. You are a young species, humans. You have no idea what you are facing. Surrender the creature, and we will forget this foolishness. Refuse, and your world will become an example for the rest of the galaxy. President Bennett looked at her advisors. Some of them were urging her to comply. One life for millions, they said. The math was simple. The choice was obvious. But before she could respond, a new voice cut through the chamber. I'd like to speak. Everyone turned. Daniel Cole walked through the crowd toward the central podium. Beside him was Ziveth, her scales shifting with nervous energy. They had not been invited to this session. They had no official standing here. But no one stopped them. Daniel reached the podium and looked up at the holographic image of the High Admiral. Then he turned to face the gathered representatives of 100 worlds. My name is Daniel Cole, he said. And this is my wife, Ziveth. The Volanthi want her back. They say she is property. They say she was given to humanity as an insult, and now they want to reclaim her. He paused, letting his words sink in. But they don't want her because she has value to them. They want her because they can't stand that someone else saw value in her. They threw her away, and now they're angry that we picked her up. The Volanthi High Admiral made a sound of disgust. This is meaningless sentiment. The creature is defective. She is worthless. We gave her to you as a lesson in humility. And there it is. Daniel's voice was calm but carried across the hall. That's how the Volanthi see their own people. Worthless. Defective. Property to be given away or reclaimed at will. He turned to face the other alien delegations. Look at us. Humans. We've only been in the galactic community for 50 years. We don't have the oldest ships or the biggest fleets. We're not the smartest or the strongest. But we understand something that the Volanthi don't. His eyes swept across the faces of beings from 100 different worlds. Every person matters. Every single one. Not because of what they can do, or how they look, or what others think of them, but because they exist. Because they are alive. Because they have the same right to love and dignity and peace as anyone else. Silence fell over the chamber. Daniel continued. When the Volanthi gave Ziveth to me, they expected me to reject her. They expected me to see what they saw: ugliness, defect, shame. But I saw a person. A person who had survived a lifetime of cruelty. A person who had been told she was worthless by everyone who should have loved her. A person who, despite everything, still had hope. He looked at Ziveth. She was crying silently, her scales rippling with emotion. I fell in love with her, not despite her differences. Because of them. Because her passion runs deep. Because her heart is fierce. because she survived what would have broken most people and came out the other side still capable of love. Daniel turned back to face the High Admiral. You ask why we won't give her back. The answer is simple. She is not property. She is not an object. She is not a bargaining chip. She is my wife. And I will stand against your entire fleet to protect her. The High Admiral laughed. One human against 40 warships? This is madness. Not one human. A new voice spoke up. The Cruthini ambassador, a being of living crystal, stepped forward. My people stand with Earth. We have watched this drama unfold, and we are moved. The humans are right. No species that treats its own people as property deserves to call itself civilized. As do we. The moth-like Sealan representative fluttered forward. The Sealan Collective will not support the Volanthi in this action. One by one, other species spoke up. The Dreth Collective, who had been on the verge of war with the Volanthi, declared their support for Earth. The Rathani Empire, the Keldorth, Federation, even the reclusive Void Singers, all of them turned against the Volanthi. The High Admiral's face went pale. You cannot be serious. You would risk galactic war over one defective female? We would risk everything, the Cruthini ambassador said, for the principle that every life has value. It is a principle worth fighting for. The Volanthi High Council found themselves suddenly alone. Their allies had abandoned them. Their threats had backfired. If they attacked Earth now, they would face not just humanity, but half the galaxy. After a long, bitter silence, the High Admiral spoke. This is not over, he snarled. The Volanthi will remember this insult. And we will remember, President Bennett replied, that when a man stood up to defend his wife, the galaxy stood with him. The Volanthi fleet withdrew. The crisis was over. That night, Daniel and Zavid stood in the garden of Linda's house, looking up at the stars. The sky was clear. Somewhere up there, the Volanthi ships were retreating into the void. I still do not understand, Zavid said softly. Why did they all stand with us? I am nobody. I am nothing. Daniel smiled and took her hand. You were never nothing. You just hadn't met the right people yet. Ziveth looked at him. Her scales were calm now, a soft blue that meant contentment. I love you, she said. It was the first time she had spoken those words. Daniel felt them wash over him like warm sunlight. I know, he said. I've known since the day you stopped breaking my things. Ziveth laughed. It was a beautiful sound, full of joy and wonder and relief. What happens now? She asked. Daniel pulled her close. Now we live. We build a home. We grow a family. We show the galaxy what happens when you give humans someone to love. Ziveth rested her head against his chest. His heartbeat was steady and strong. They gave you their ugliest, most jealous female, she murmured. And you turned her into something beautiful. Daniel kissed the top of her head. You were always beautiful. You just needed someone to help you see it. They stood together in the garden, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars. Behind them, the house glowed with warm light. Ahead of them, the future stretched out like an endless sea of possibilities. And for the first time in her life, Ziveth was not afraid of what might come next. Because whatever happened, she would not face it alone. Never again.